Hey, what's up, bookworms? We're back with the Author's Corner, and this time it is an author that's kind of taken over my reading plans for this year. Let me introduce author, screenwriter, and musician Ronald Malfi. Ron, how are you this evening?
Mike, how are you? Thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
I'm living the dream. Thank you for making the time. I know you're very busy. A lot of people have no idea that you are the front man for a rock band. How about that, huh?
I know that's the best marketing ploy we can have is a kept secret rock band that we don't tell anybody about. It makes our shows, there's like 6 people there. No. I play for a rock band called Veer. We are located in Maryland, and we've been I think next year will be 10 years with that group. Yeah.
Outstanding. Rock stars want to be athletes, and athletes want to be rock stars, but now rock stars want to be authors, and authors want to be rock stars, right? I think everybody wants to be a rock star, right?
I don't know if I want to do any of it anymore. It's very tiring.
Right? I feel you. Well, look, I'm going to just be honest here. I've been looking for a modern horror novelist for a while. I'm a big Stephen King guy. It's not a secret. And Stephen only wants to write about Holly now. He doesn't want to write scary books anymore. And you know what? He's earned that right to do that, honestly. He has. So I've been kind of searching around for modern horror authors for a while. I've never really found any that, outside of one book that I really, really liked. And then I read Blackmouth this year, and it just kind of took over everything in my plans. So I'm very excited to have you here and talk about that. I've been looking for an author such as you for a while now, and I'm very excited that I feel like I found an appointment horror author again. I'm very excited about that. We're going to talk about The Hive here in a little while, but First, thank you so much. This has been really, really great for me because every single time I talk about a Stephen King book, they're like, "Oh, I think you like this author," and I think you like, and you go, you probably know, you go and you read them, you're like, "It's not like Stephen King at all." But this was one of the recommendations that really, really hit for me when people know how much I love It by Stephen King, and a lot of them said, "Hey, I think you really like Blackmouth a lot," and it's been great. I read those 2, and then I read 6, this year. So, and I actually haven't caught up yet, but I'm kind of doing what I did when I discovered Blake Crouch books. I kind of just devoured his back catalog. I think I'm going to kind of keep doing that, but I'm starting to run out of books here. So, I'm glad that you're doing the rock and roll thing, but I hope you keep writing pretty quick here. But I don't know. I don't know really where to start except just let's do the usual. Let's influences. Sure. I mean, you've got to be a Stephen King guy somewhat, right? I think we all are of that age.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up reading Stephen King. The first book of his that I read, I was maybe like 11 years old or so, was Eyes of the Dragon, which isn't really a well-known, horror novel of his. But that kind of was my gateway. And then I remember being in middle school and hearing guys at like the lunch table whispering about this really big book by this guy, Stephen King, where there's a sex scene between all the kids in this book. It's called It. And I'm like, well, shit, I got to get that book. So, so I got it for Christmas. I asked for it. My parents got it for me. That and Pet Sematary and Misery. And I started reading the book, and of course the scene that I'm talking about isn't until like page 1000 or whatever.
Yeah, right.
but as I started this book, I fell in love with it, and I would read it nonstop. I took it to school with me. I read it in school. And by the time I was done with it, I'm like, I want to be a writer. Like, this is like what I want to do. And it's funny because, I mean, everybody calls out the similarities in Blackmouth to It, which I find a little. I get why people say that, but it's sort of like, I read so much, and it's like, well, Stephen King doesn't have ownership over like the
kids to adults
to adults thing, this whole thing. And actually, it was I want to say it was a combo of Craig DeLuise, The Children of Red Peak, and Peter Straub's Coco, that was the impetus for Blackmouth, actually, those 2 books. I mean, Stephen King got me started, and then I progressed to reading like people like Peter Straub, who showed me that there were really no bounds in what you could do with fiction. And then, for better or worse, I fell in love with Ernest Hemingway when I was in college, and I just loved his idea of like the iceberg theory of fiction, where you're only just kind of giving your readers the peak, that like the tip of the iceberg that's poking out, and everything else needs to be sort of kind of inferred, and not really spelled out as much. So I like a lot of that sort of stuff too. But I read everything. I always seem to learn something from a book I read. So
yeah, your parents seem like they were much cooler than mine. I was raised in a very strict Pentecostal household, and I basically my parents thought that Stephen King was the devil, so I had to read it in secret, but I did it. I think that's kind of this guy. We had to hide our Kiss albums and Beach Boy album covers, and things like that. And then when I realized I had to start hiding books, it was like, what is going on here? But my folks that come around now and they try to pretend that never happened, but that did happen. So did you know that you always wanted to write primarily horror? And would you consider yourself a horror author?
I actually don't. I mean, I think when I just started writing, I always kind of gravitated towards horror movies, horror, both, dark fiction. And when I started writing, it just kind of, the natural inclination was to kind of go in that direction. It never occurred to me that was explicitly what I was doing. It was just what interested me. And I think that's sort of what, I've written a lot of stuff that I think diehard horror, fans would read and go, well, this isn't really horror. But then, you throw it over to like the mystery or thriller readers and they go, whoa, this is too horror for what we do. So I walk this weird tightrope of ambiguity. Like, what the hell am I? But yeah, it's just what comes natural. I don't know. It's not like I think it through necessarily.
I found with horror fans that there is no other community of fans of a genre that like to make subgenres within that genre. Like, I remember when I was doing like my favorite horror books and I put Anne Rice on there and people were like, oh, Vampire Chronicles isn't horror, it's gothic horror. And I was like, what? So I'm sure you probably get that a lot.
I get that all the time. It's like, Black Mouth. Black Mouth isn't a horror novel. It is a traumatic, dark, speculative, paranormal, haunted magician hippopotamus novel. I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, you're getting really specific, but all right.
Right, it really is. I mean, you've written thrillers, you've written mysteries, crime. Have you ever thought about maybe, I don't know, busting into fantasy or science fiction? Anything different out there that you still think you might have up your sleeve someday?
You know what? I've got, I have, and I do think some of the stuff I've done maybe touches on it. I've got sort of a back pocket trunk novel that it's kind of almost done. I've had it for a few years. That is, I guess you'd call it fantasy / sci-fi, very almost like David Mitchell style, like Cloud Atlas stuff, Bone Clocks, like that kind of vein. But really, it's not, because it's not that there's a genre that I want to approach and do something with. It's more like whatever the story that hits me, I want to run with, and whatever that happens to be, it happens to be, so it's not like I, plan it out like that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something down the pike where it'll be more fantasy, sci-fi, because they're all interconnected to some degree. And
Joe Hill just put out a horror fantasy book, with King Sorrow. So I think there's definitely room for it.
I saw your review a lot. I'm very excited to read it. Yeah,
I've seen that there's a lot of. There seems to be an appetite for that, for either horror fantasy, but like full on like medieval fantasy, but with just just creepy monsters and stuff in it. And I try to tell people there's a lot more similarity, because most of my audience is fantasy readers. But a lot of time, you replace the dragon with a demon, man. There's a lot of similarities between these two genres, really is, if you really want to get into it. And there's a lot of stuff in these fantasy books I read. I was like, well, that's way more messed up than most horror books I've read. Yeah. So, I always say that history is the real grimdark. It really, really is. But
and a lot of those labels are from the publisher, like what they say, well, it has to have this, this, and this to be categorized as this type of book. Or, I mean, like my last book, Senseless. I mean, it's because I'm on the horror section of the bookstore shelves. That's what it was. I could argue that book isn't really a horror novel at all. Yeah. It's dark, it's noirish, it's suspense, but there's really for people who are going in there, and it was kind of mistouted as a vampire novel, but it's sort of not really, So again, that ambiguous tightrope walk.
Yeah, it's like if you have a teenage female protagonist, they're going to make you put it in the YA section.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. Something I see a lot in the horror community is, but I see this more with horror than any other genre out there, is the complaint about the endings. The endings, obviously, as a writer, I think endings got to be the hardest thing to stick. But I think with horror, it's just like no one's ever happy, because if you have a happy ending, oh, it's unrealistic. If you have a dour ending, oh, well, I need some hope in my life. If you have an ambiguous ending, oh, I need some kind of resolution. How hard is it to write an ending in a horror book?
I'm a big fan of kind of cyclical fiction. So everything sort of resonates in a story, and the story becomes the story becomes the world. And I like things being a little pat and a little this is the inner Spielberg in me. I like things being a little sentimental, I guess. So I do like that full circle approach to writing an ending to a story, where everything should really just click and satisfy, even if it's not the ending the reader might be expecting. But when you were just kind of earlier, when you were saying stuff about how horror readers love to just pigeonhole things and kind of bring it down to the lowest common denominator, it's similar to when you're writing horror fiction. I don't know if other genres kind of pick apart their readership picks apart the books the same way, but it's like you could write it's so hard to please everyone with everything. So you could write a 800-page novel about two characters and whatever, and someone could go, I love this. It could have gone for another 800 pages. I love what this is. And then another reader will be like, this needs to be half the length.
Yeah.
It needs to, and it's like everybody's coming from a different place expecting. And I think a lot of that is kind of this modern readership where readers come to books with expectations, which I find weird, because when I was younger, like as a kid, I never had expectations. I saw what book cover looked cool in a bookstore or at a grocery store, picked it up and wondered where it would take me. I never brought any preloaded conceptions to reading a book. And people now, it's like, well, I picked this up and I liked it, but I really don't like books that end with the word "the." So, it's like, well, okay, sorry, I don't know. Like or it's not anything of what I thought it would be. Well, how do you know what you thought it would be?
Yeah, as a King fan, I love the way he writes slice of life. And some people sometimes like 11/22/63 is like an amazing book, and it has parts where you just have the characters Jake and Sadie. It's just like they're just living their life in the 60s. You can tell that King's just reminiscing about that time when he was that age, and I love that stuff because he's just so good at it. And I'll have people tell me, that book was pretty good, but it could be about 300 pages shorter. It could have cut out that part where they weren't like doing nothing. I'm like, oh, you mean my favorite part of the book? So yeah. It's definitely gonna be different.
That's exactly my point. Yeah.
So you like to write you like to write a lot of your own life experiences into your books, correct?
I mean, they're wearing costumes, but yes, I mean, but I think that's normal for anybody who writes or does any kind of creative thing. You're going to bring in things that experiences that you've had, stories you've heard, things you've seen. I just came back from, like we were talking before we were recording, I just finished up a pretty extensive book tour, and I'm like, I'm in an inn in Massachusetts for like a night, and everything is jumping out. The place looks haunted as hell. Yeah. And so I'm like, just a conversation I could overhear will make it into a book. Some random dude came up to me and asked me to move a piano. That actually happened. I'm like, that's going in a book. So it's bizarre, but yeah. So I mean, but I get what you're saying. Yes. Also, I mean, there are parts of my life or I won't go as far to say like demons I'm exercising and doing this stuff, but it is a bit of therapy for a writer to kind of get some of that stuff out on the page.
All right, we'll loop back to that one when we get to December Park. But the reason I really kind of brought it up was like I learned a couple months ago that apparently your father worked in the Secret Service. Is that something you've ever written into one of your books that I haven't read yet, maybe?
I have. So I wrote a book called Shamrock Alley. Came out in like 2009. And it's basically a fictionalized account of a case that my dad worked for the Secret Service back in like the late 70s, early 80s. But basically he went undercover for a series of months with this gang in New York City called the Westies. And these guys were violent as hell. my dad became like a gang member with these guys, and it was a money laundering thing. That's how he got, or not a counterfeit money operation. That's how the Secret Service got in. But these guys were killing people. They were chopping off their hands, and they'd keep their hands in like freezer bags, and they'd leave their fingerprints at crime scenes to throw the cops off. It became this whole crazy thing. If you've ever seen the movie State of Grace with Sean Penn, Sean Penn plays my dad basically in that movie. That's the case. Yeah. So I wrote a novel that kind of fictionalized the story, the real story, back in like 2009. The book is out of print now, but it seems to be like a cult favorite among like horror writers. I guess they something about the just over the top grotesque nature of who these gang members were, and the heinous stuff that they did that just kind of appeals to the sick side of people I know.
My dad was pretty boring by comparison.
Well, when the book came out, my book tour was called "My Dad Could Beat Up Your Dad," and that's what like you mentioned it as.
That's perfect. All right, so I'm going to kind of start talking about the kind of order that I read some of these books in, and ask you a couple things about each one. Again, I know you wrote some of these much longer ago than when I read them, so they're probably not going to be as fresh to you. So if you don't remember, probably, man, I don't know. I've slept since we're almost the same age. I know I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember all the words of the Humpty Dance. It's really weird. Come With Me. Now, Come With Me was the first one that I picked up. That happened last year. It's kind of late in the year. I wasn't really sure what to expect. That was the one that a viewer had sent to me and said, "Hey, I really think you'd like this author." So that's where I started, even though everyone was telling me, no, start with Black Mouse, start with Bone White. Everyone was telling me to start with something different than Come With Me, because they're like, it's really more of a mystery story than what I think you're looking for. But what really stood out to me in Come With Me was you did an outstanding job of writing grief. Now, you mentioned Pet Sematary earlier, and I said that what that book did, it really just moved me, was just how he wrote grief. Like, I felt for that character. The way you write is it Aaron in that book about how him dealing with the sudden unexpected loss of his wife really hit me hard before the mystery even started. I hope that this wasn't like based on anything, this tragedy in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what edition of the book you have, but there's an author's note at the end where I say, this book came from two places. One of the places was I was reading Michelle McNamara's "I'll Be Gone in the Dark" about the Golden State Killer, that nonfiction book about her hunting down this killer, like through basically like internet searches. And I just like that concept, and I like that idea as a character for a novel. And as I was kind of stewing on that, a friend of mine, a reporter for the Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis, she was one of actually a whole I want to say 5. I can't remember now off the top of my head. Reporters were killed in a gunman basically went into their office building and shot the place up and killed them. I mean, it made international news, really. They were on the cover of Time Life magazine and everything. And it just was just a horrific tragedy. And she was Wendy Winters was her name. She was just a sweetheart of a person. She was one of the first reporters who would chronicle the stuff I was doing when I was an up and coming writer. She lived local to me. So in the sort of the impetus for Come With Me was sort of thinking about that McNamara book, and then kind of coming to terms with my own grief, really, of my friend's untimely death. So it comes from a kind of a dark spot, and I think a lot of that sort of resonates in the tone of the novel. But I let it resonate. I thought that was it. And it was, I said it earlier, it's not like these books are like in some sort of exorcism, but that kind of was, it was sort of my way of dealing with something senseless and tragic that had happened to someone I knew. And that's where that book came from. And I think it does, for me, at least, it does resonate in the text of that novel, Yeah, and it's funny because when people say that's not like a quintessential Ronald Malfi horror novel, for me it's horrific, but so it's
there's creepy monsters, horrific, and then there's real life monsters that's always going to be a lot worse. I will say, I told my wife, she's a real big true crime fan. She loves to read like nonfiction true crime stuff like this. I was like, that's got you written all over. I think that would be the one I'd recommend to her when I finally get it, because she's like, read this author a lot. Should I read some of these books? Like, yes, it should. Now, I will say, now, guys, don't get worried. This isn't going to like ruin anything for you out of context if you haven't read. Some people be like, oh, you spoiled it for me. But I will say I expected a twist ending. And I think it's because I've been watching too much M. Night Shyamalan or something. So I expected a twist ending. There was a part in the book with Aaron. He has a flashback with his wife, and she's in the light, and he used this phrase where he says, like, you look like a ghost. And then later on, you're getting this point of view of someone who's encountering the killer. Mm-hmm. And he tells her, you look like a ghost. It's like, oh my God, is Aaron going to be the killer? And he just like repressed it. He doesn't remember it. So good misdirection there. Very good misdirection. Was that on purpose, or am I making,
the funny, the twist of that? Yeah. And again, like, maybe it's spoiler by omission, but I mean, the twist of that book is that I didn't want to have a twist in that book. I wanted it to kind of go straight ahead and be the story that it was. And I've had, even my editors and my agent at the time were, hey, they came up with all these M. Night Shyamalan. I'm like, that's all fine and good. I said, it's not my book. That's not what this is.
The subversion is that there is no subversion. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, think about where we've come. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. So,
right. Okay, well, this, I'm going to be straight with this. This is going to be in consideration for my book of the year. I love this so much. I've probably gotten a couple hundred people to read it. So I hope you saw a shoot up on the sales on Amazon, because lots of people were talking about reading this after talking about it. Look, obviously, I understand why people are making a comparison. I always tell people that's a lazy comparison. Stop doing it. Like you kind of said, everyone who has it, hey, this is what happened when they were kids, and it made them be messed up adults. That Stephen King didn't create that. That's like people who are like, oh, you can't tell a story from a first person point of view, telling a story because Patrick Rothfuss did it. And I'm like, well, David Copperfield might have something to say about that.
Yeah, exactly.
These things predate all that. But with it being my favorite King book, this is the one that got recommended to me the most. I've always loved the concurrent story of flashing back between the kids and the adults and seeing what did they do that's so messed up, and I think the way you pace this, where you don't really even find out what this big deal happened until about halfway through the book. Big theme in King's books is always, these traumatic childhood events are what kind of form the messed up adults that we become. And I think that's as true as anything in real life. What was the basis for this one? How did you come up with this idea? Because I still tell my kids sometimes, hey, you want to see a magic trick? And they have no idea what I'm talking about. But I'm like, trust me, it's scary.
Well, you know what I don't think King's book does is actually address the reality of the trauma that follows the characters into adulthood, because everything I think is kind of clouded by the mystique that they're fighting, and so there's a lot of that going on. And I really wanted to be true to those problems, the alcoholism, the physical abuse, all that stuff. And I really wanted to show what that does to kids. And that's not necessarily even a horror element. It is just reality, right? So that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. And I liked the idea. I liked the idea of exploring how that trauma affects kids who are basically manipulated by an outside entity, another person, another thing, whatever you want to call it. And they're basically innocents who are corrupted, and how they come to terms with that in adulthood and what that does to them. That's really the impetus for it. I mentioned earlier, kind of like thinking about like Coco and Children of Red Peak and books like that were the sort of like the impetus for writing that book. But really my big thing was, in thinking of that story, I was thinking of the Slender Man mythos. Oh. And that true story about those two girls who took like their friend to the woods and stabbed this kid a bunch of times, and the kid survived, but it's sort of like they did it at the behest of this imaginary figure that they believe to be real. And I'm like, well, what does that do to those kids as they grow up? Not just the one who was attacked, but also the ones who were under that influence. So that's really where Blackmouth comes from. It's kind of thinking about those issues and the resonance of what that kind of trauma does to a person.
Oh, it was great. And I have a special needs kid, so I was very endeared to Dennis. So thank you for that. Was that based off of anything, or just something you wanted to do?
No, it's not really based off of anything. And I was deliberate. Now you could probably parse through the text and figure out what Dennis might have, right? But I was deliberate in not naming it and wanting it to be this unknown quantity. And it's funny, the audiobook narrator gave me a lot of Joe Hempel, who does a lot of my audio stuff, gave me a lot of props for that character as well. He really resonated with it. Yeah, no, I mean, it worked with the story, and I just really wanted to be true to what I felt, though, not just that but all the characters would actually be like in real life if this were to have happened to them.
Sure, yeah, no, that was Gen X. It was basically that we were the last generation to rub some dirt on it, walk it off. You know, there was a actual medical condition. It was like, oh, they'll be fine. They'll work it out. They'll figure it out. And that's kind of funny talking about how the 80s were kind of the Wild West. Is some people that were reading this after I talked about it, like, what's up with these parents like letting their kids go out into the forest and talk to some drifter? I was like, dude, our parents told us to go outside and don't come back in till the lights came on. It's like,
oh, absolutely.
If my parents knew the shit I was doing, I would have been dead. Okay. So.
Absolutely. I didn't feel a need to explain that away. I think we all know that existed at a point in time. Yeah.
All right. So Senseless, this was the first one I got to read a review copy of. And the thing was, like, I could tell it was going to be different. Like you said, a lot of things that fantasy authors are going through right now is it's Game of Thrones meets blank, and it's nothing like either of the things that they're comparing it to. So I can see what you're talking about with saying the vampire stuff. So of course that interested me. But I was pretty sure this is going to be kind of a detective book. And I'll be honest, I haven't done a lot of detective crime stuff. I think Girl with a Dragon Tattoo might be about as far as I really went. I'm going to be trying Michael Connelly for the first time next month in a reading group. So that should be very interesting.
That was great.
It was, I think, a good way to rope me in to say, hey, yeah, maybe it's vampires. Maybe it's not. So how much do you like the, I guess, the formula of, is it a supernatural or is it a killer? Is that something that you're a big fan of, or is that something the publisher's making you do? Or
no, you know what? I found myself again, it wasn't something conscious, but I found myself gravitating toward just doing a lot of that stuff. I put a lot of character work, atmosphere. I sweat over these books for a year as I'm writing them. And I found that the more, and I love the horror genre, and I love all facets of horror. But for me, when I'm writing, I found that there's a certain, if you think of your characters as actors on a stage, there's a certain set piece that needs to be behind them for whatever play that they're putting on. And that set piece has to be true to their character, right? And I can't do all this, what I feel is kind of deep character work, just to go, and there's a bunch of giant mushrooms eating people. Like, oh, okay, well, that's a little strange. So I sort of allow the characters in the story, particularly the main protagonists, to dictate which way I'm going to push, how far into the speculative realm that I'll push a story. Black Mouth, the end of Black Mouth gets a little wonky, right? It gets a little speculative and it gets out there. But I was able to do that and still keep it within the bounds of what I felt where that was that world, because of Jamie Warren, the protagonist, who's going through alcohol withdrawal. He allowed his mindset allowed me to expand what I did in that world, right? A book like Senseless, I love the fact that every time you turn your head, there could be a supernatural explanation for something that's going on. And maybe there is, or maybe there's not. And it's tough to walk that line and to lay the groundwork for both, because you've got to give evidence for why it could be one or the other. But, I've been doing this for a while, and I find, the enjoyment in kind of taxing myself with, and seeing if I could actually pull it off. So that's really what Senseless was. I mean, Senseless was really, I don't want to give the spoiler away for that book, but when I pitched it to, I said, here's what I'm going to do. And here's kind of how it's going to end, but you got to trust me. Let me run with it. Let me do it, and they did. And, hey, for better or worse, it is what it is. But I was pushing myself as an author to see if I could pull off what I really wanted to pull off. It's an unusual book, even the way it's formatted and the way the story unfolds and the random character chapters and how they all pop in there. It's not the norm, but it tested me as a writer to try to do something like that.
I can see what you said earlier that people who just read crime novels will read these and be like, that's a little too messed up. Because I think the son-in-law was it Landon? Landon, yeah, he's real Silence of the Lambs kind of creepy, and that just a little bit. That was the biggest. What the hell just happened? But yeah, I can see why that probably would make some crime readers be like, this might be a little different.
Well, nor does it follow the beats of a traditional crime story. Like, you know, some of these things you pick up, it's like, well, all right, we're in Act 3 and we know what's going to happen. And, you know, and I didn't want this book to follow it. And that's why I even leaned kind of tongue in cheek into the title of the novel and been like, hey, if it doesn't make sense to you, there it is. I told you right on the cover. So,
all right, man, this one, big fan. I liked it a whole bunch. This was one of the earliest ones that I was recommended because I all the time talk about what King did with Castle Rock and how that's just such an amazing small community, writing a small community, things like that. But what I really dug about this is and I mean this as a compliment, it felt kind of like I Know What You Did Last Summer, but with less likable heroes. And I think that if you can write characters that really just aren't good people, but I still want to see them succeed. I say that's what I love about like the grimdark genre. If you can make me root for those characters do awful things, and these characters are always looking out for number one, I felt like you're doing something really, really well here. But again, writing the small community, writing that kind of that coastal town, it just really gave me the vibes of I Know What You Did Last Summer. But you know, obviously, but not quite as 1990s scream horror or whatever. I mean, what was the basis for this one?
Yeah. So and it's funny, and one of the I'll throw this out there before it slips my mind. I mean, one of my huge pet peeves on when I hear people talk about books is like, and editors do this, agents do this, readers do this. They're like, oh, the characters weren't likable. I mean, that's forget it. I mean, like, are you going to have lunch with Patrick Bateman from American Psycho? No, he's not likable. Darth Vader is not likable. I'm sorry. But I think that what they're saying is when they don't, like, sometimes a character may not be relatable and it doesn't resonate. But I think you can have unlikable characters who you could empathize with still and find some commonality and realism in their story to follow them along. And that's what I was deliberately doing with this book. You shouldn't like the characters in this book, I'll be clear. And really where Small Town Horror came from is I was writing Black Mouth. I took a story about a group of kids who were manipulated by an outside force, and now as adults are dealing with the repercussions of that. They were innocent, but they were thrust into it. And as I'm writing that, I'm like, what if they're not innocent? What if they're actually bad people and they're also now adults dealing with the repercussions? So I look at Black Mouth and Small Town Horror as sort of sister novels of each other. They're the photo negative, the yin and yang, So I took that same concept for both books and just explored if it happened to different people, how that would play out. And there's even mention of the kids from Black Mouth in Small Town Horror. It's like one line where they talk about what have we done? My uncle knew about a bunch of kids who did something terrible in West Virginia a few years ago. So I kind of tied it in a little bit. But yeah, it's just about it's kind of taking the same thing but exploring it from two different directions.
I mean, yeah, I guess Andrew is making like every decision possibly wrong in that book when it pertains to his wife. And I'm still like, but I still want them to work it out. And by the way, the twist with the identity of his wife, some people said I had no idea where that
Nobody
was.
Nobody saw it coming. I don't believe anybody saw it coming.
That was, man. Everyone, and then there was the parts down like the flooded basement. I was like, man, this is like room 217 kind of creepy shit here. So I think that one really, big time horror fans are really, really going to do that. So the name Small Town Horror, it's not just a fancy name. It's actually quite apt. But I want to know, how much courage did that ending take you to write? Because holy shit, I had to reread it when I first. I was like, sure, wait, no, hang on, that didn't just happen, and that's an ending that still hasn't left my head. Where did you come up with that? I mean,
you know what? It's every book I never outline. I don't have really notes on anything. I may have like a yellow notepad where I'll jot like a.
So you didn't know where you were going. Okay.
So I start every book not really knowing how it's going to end. And I was probably as surprised as you were when I got to the end. I'm like, I guess this is how it goes. Sorry, fellas, but yeah, I mean that's how. Did your
publisher push back on that one at all, or did they let it fly? You earned your stripes at this point. They trust you.
They trusted me. Yeah,
that's pretty good. Okay, so December Park. Now, December Park, obviously, I got to mention coming of age. That's my favorite thing in all of fiction. I can't get enough. Again, I grew up a King reader. I grew up with To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah, I love a good coming of age story because I think we all have had it. We've all had that time of the transition from childhood to adulthood and how that time just seemed so magical. Yet everything seems so important. And then you got older, you're like, well, it wasn't important. But you know what? We thought it was. I think that there was a scene in this book where you are describing Angelo's bedroom. And I'm like, I think Ronald Malfi was peeking in my window because he's describing my bedroom right now. This was absolutely amazing. So I'm guessing that was your bedroom as well.
It was my bedroom as well. Yeah. That's the most autobiographical of all my books. It's basically about me and my friends growing up.
Isn't it in Maryland as well? It's in Maryland. Right?
Yeah. I took a snapshot of from like 1993 into 1994. The book basically spans a year. And it's just me and my friends and what we were like in a year's time growing up against the backdrop of hunting down a serial killer. That's kind of what it became.
I was 15 in 1993. So of all the stories, it's the one that I saw me and my friends on the page the most with. So it was a really good, I think that you touched on without just doing the whole like, hey, remember all those things you loved in the 90s, like mentioning like what band they're listening to and things like that. I was like, okay, he's really digging back. So it just took me, and I started, picking up my Pearl Jam, my Soundgarden albums and stuff after reading that. So that was a great, great trip. But the ending again, never saw coming. Did you know the killer's identity the whole time, or is this another one you kind of thought about as you went?
No, that book went through a lot of iterations. I wrote the first draft of that novel when I was in high school. It was called The House in the Woods at the time. And the reason I wrote it is I was writing a bunch of, manuscripts and stuff in high school. I wanted my friends to read them, and nobody, these are high school guys. They don't want to read, they're like, I'm not reading your stuff. So I wrote a novel that they were all in, and I actually used the first version I used their real names. So they all read it to read their parts. Right. So that's how I got them to read it. And, but then it sat for decades in a trunk, and until I came back and I revisited it, and I realized what was wrong with it and how to fix it and all that stuff. As far as the killer, no. So halfway through writing it, I didn't know who my killer was. I actually thought it was going to be a different character in the book. And then I realized that wasn't sufficient enough for me. I didn't want somebody to just, if you had 20 characters in my book and you had 20 people sitting there and each one was assigned, okay, guess a different character, someone would guess the killer because there's 20, I'm like, no, I want to have somebody out of left field, but also have it make sense. And to not give a lot away on that either, when I realized that the book was really about Angelo's journey from childhood to adulthood, the loss of innocence, the understanding of, the realization that things you believed to be one way really weren't that way, right? Yeah. As we look back on stuff with adult eyes to our childhood, it clicked. And I'm like, the killer is been staring me at the face, in the face, kind of off stage the whole time. And I know there's some readers who read that and go, oh, that's just out of nowhere. That can't be. What I would beg of them is to don't take it so literally, even though it's literal. Think of the metaphor that the book itself encompasses. Think of the reason why it had to be that person. And from our main character's point of view. And that's what solidified it for me. Yeah. So I was halfway through, and that's a big book. I was halfway through and I'm like, where is this going, man? I don't know.
Is that your biggest book, right? The Hive might be bigger, right?
The Hive is much bigger. Yeah.
I was like surprised because I was like, I'm reading all these in like 2 days. I was like, this one's taking a bit. So, and because I was reading that one on Kindle. So, you can't see it. So you have no idea how long it is. Like, but obviously, it's been one of my favorites so far because I do love a good coming of age story. Like I said, saw so much. I love the part where Angelo's standing up to the bully. That was just, I'm just like fist pumping. So good. So, hope that was you that stood up to the bully in your younger years. How about?
I've done some standing up. That's
right. All right, good. This is the one I got recommended the most when I first started hearing your name. A lot of people because they know I love John Carpenter's The Thing. And that really kind of drew my love of, this being scared in an isolated place in the snowy wilderness. I'm like, I think this would be something you like. Maybe a little bit of Wendigo kind of stuff in there. That'd be something that you probably dig. But look, after reading this, like my wife, her bucket list, she wants to see the Northern Lights. And I'm like, well, I read this, so I'm never going to Alaska with you. So you're going to have to go without me now. So thank you. You saved me a lot of money. But this was really, you did a great job of making that, how scary isolation can really feel, and no one's coming to help you. Where'd this one come from? What dark pit in your brain did this one come out of?
This was a total mashup in my head of, and I think I pitched it this way, was Silence of the Lambs meets The Exorcist, and that's kind of where I wanted to go. And I know it's got a very like everybody, like the Wendigo was never really front of mind when I was writing it, but everybody kind of gets that vibe from reading it, and I totally see that, and I probably could have leaned more into it had I realized that as I was writing it. But yeah, it was just again, I really liked it's about twin brothers, one of them goes missing. I love the duality of nature, and I use that a lot in my books, a lot of misunderstood identity or the duality of things. It's a lot of echoes of that in my book, like Senseless and Small Town Horror. Examine that. This one it's very literal. And it just becomes this idea of good versus evil, the good, the good proper brother always looking for the malcontent, lazy, ne'er-do-well brother, and how those roles affect each other. So I'm a big brother guy. Like, I have people read my stuff, they're like, you write another book about brothers? You always got brothers in there. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where all that came from. And I also read something, it never really made it into the book, but I read something about there was this police officer who was arrested years ago called the Cannibal Cop. And he was a cop, but he killed and ate people. And that's sort of where this started, but it never actually materialized in the text. Books come from a lot of different places when I'm writing something, and it's not until all those kind of particles collide where I'm like, oh, there it is. It's that character from this idea and that newspaper article I read and this location, and it all kind of comes together and crashes. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it is. That makes sense. Yeah.
So how about the night parade here? Due to things like The Last of Us and The Mandalorian, old person protecting younger persons become quite popular, obviously. So this was a real easy sell for me. But for me, when I read it, I was like, I'm getting a lot more of Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and it kind of meets Stephen King's The Stand a little bit. So I guess you would say this was your first dystopian book? Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it's sort of, I don't even know if it's a post-apocalyptic. It's kind of apocalyptic. It's sort of like right there. And really, the whole thing with this book. So, the Last of Us, I didn't even know what that was until the TV show aired, which was years after this book came out. Yeah. And the similarities are creepy. Like, even the characters' names are
the names are the same.
Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, well, yeah. I'm like, I'm not like, I guess it was a video game before it was a show. I'm video game illiterate, so I don't know. But it is creepy how similar those things are. And but it is a road novel, but more than that, it's a father-daughter novel. I've got two kids, and that changes you as a person. Absolutely. And when you start thinking of stories and writing, that kind of informs where your head is at. And I remember when I first came up with the idea for this book, and I went out with some friends, I'm like, I'm thinking about writing this book. It's about this father who's protecting his daughter during this disease outbreak that's wiping out a big portion of the population. And this also predates COVID, so I didn't,
Sure. But someone brought that up when I was reading it. If this had came out during COVID, people would have lost their mind.
No, this came out in I think it was 2016. The book was published. But I was like, this is his father. His daughter is the cure for this illness, and they could save mankind, but the daughter would die, and he doesn't want to turn her in. And I had friends of mine who heard that synopsis, and they're like, good for him. He should protect his daughter. I had other friends that were like, well, that's shitty. You're going to let the entire human race die. And once I realized there was such a disparate response to it, I'm like, I got to write this book because I don't know whose answer is right. I mean, I know what my answer would be, but as far as it begged for that discussion, right? So that's what I'm like, oh, I got to write it now,
It's easy
And,
for someone to say that when it's not their kid, and it's your kid.
And I also
You're thinking
noticed that
differently.
the people who said that it was selfish of him protecting his daughter also didn't have kids. So I also see that too. But yeah.
So that's why I say anybody who has young kids, it's going to resonate with it, but it'll break your heart a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think. And then the most recent one I've read, The ℕ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕠𝕜𝕤. Now, I think, are you really a horror author until you write a book about vampires? I mean, that's kind of like that's like graduating. That's getting your high school diploma right there, right?
It's again, is it really vampires?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I take such a spin on it. So like when I pitched that book, I said I love the vampire aesthetic. I love the tone and the atmosphere of a vampire novel, but I don't want to write a vampire novel. So I took all those aesthetics, put them together, and just kind of came up with like what I thought, if something existed that might make people over the centuries think vampires existed, what would that creature actually be? Right. So I kind of played around a little bit with that, and I had fun with what the creature and the creatures are throughout that book. But I mean, the whole novel, all whatever it is, 450, 500 pages, is it's just an allegory of a dying small town that I play out in monster fashion, I guess. It's one of my rare like monster novels. I can't argue that it's not a straight up horror monster novel.
Yeah, small town community, something I never get tired of. And the guy he's going to be a lawyer, but then he goes to take care of his dad. He just ends up becoming a cop and staying in that. It's one of those things like you can never get out of that small town. You thought you were out, and it pulls me back in, that kind of thing. Right. But I say incredibly freaky monsters. Like some of the murder scenes in there are just like, oh my God, what is going on right now? So that's why I always say if I got to pick one of these to adapt, it might be this one, just to see how effed up they can make those monsters be. I think that'd be some really, really creepy stuff. Do you have any adaptations on the table, any offers or anything in the works?
Yeah, I mean, every one of the books you talked about tonight is under option to some degree. Yeah.
That pays for all those guitars up there, I bet.
I know you got to put my band in the movie, so that's why
all the authors I talked to have said, hey, just because it gets optioned, it's more than likely never going to get made.
They've all been optioned. Some of these have been optioned more than once. The one that came closest was Bone White. That was picked up by Fox, then Disney, and then Disney owned Fox. They bought it. They sold it to Amazon. It was going to be an Amazon
or for theater
for streaming. So Amazon Studios was doing it as a series. It was the same producers as The Handmaid's Tale, and then COVID happened and it killed the whole thing. I just watched over a 2-year period this whole thing fall apart. That one got pretty close, but they've all been under. And in fact, Small Town Horror started as an original concept that I pitched to a studio that they optioned and wound up. We developed the series. I wrote like a pilot episode and worked with all them, and then that fell apart. So I'm like, well, screw it. I'm going to write the book. So I took it back, and so they've all been to kind of like different stages of almost there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed, because I think several of these, I'm like, I could see these as a limited series. They could really, really messing people up, with all the options these days for streaming to just be full on R-rated. I just feel like, there's new interest, I think, in horror. I think I don't know where you stand on this. I know that a lot of modern horror authors like, get that out of here. Like, cause we grew up with, the best decade. I'm sorry, I'm going to say the best decade of horror, 80s on screen. Yeah. But my kids and my wife and I also, we really got into the Conjuring universe. Really, as my kids, I felt like it was great starter horror. And I feel like those kids, like how they grew up with the MCU. My kids now are growing up with the Conjuring universe, and they have more interest in horror movies than they ever did before. So I feel like there's, you look at the success of something like Stranger Things. I'm just like, I think that there's more room for things like these on the small screen. If we could just, quit making Star Wars and MCU series and stuff.
Well, absolutely. I mean, horror has, and for several years now, has had such a huge resurgence. It's a commodity now. I mean, from Stranger Things to everything Mike Flanagan's doing to, you'll get these big blockbuster movies that flop, but some small $5 million horror movie still knocks it out of the park in the theater.
Right.
You know, some of the best, smartest, lowest budgeted movies are horror. I mean, even now, like some of these things that come up are just fantastic. So it's never it doesn't never goes away. I think it's in a resurgence now. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I've got a lot, not just for myself, but I've got a lot of friends and colleagues in this industry who are all doing the same thing I'm doing. I keep my fingers crossed for all of them. And a lot of them have already had success with movies and stuff, but I love to see that next wave of people doing this stuff, original material getting out there, not rehashing something that's already been rehashed 16 times. Get that new stuff out there because there's so much of it out there. And there's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm starting to see remakes of stuff that came out in the 2000s. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing right now?
Like remakes of a remake of a I mean, at some point, the Xerox machine is going to get all fuzzy. I don't know.
Well, I was talking about that. One of the books I plan to read next year is High Fidelity by Nick Hornby. And I was like, I saw that movie, I think, back in like 2001 or 2 or something like that. And like, oh, yeah, there's a new series on it. I was like, they remade it already? It's like, it's not even that old.
Oh, I didn't know. The movie's great. I also love the book. The book is fantastic. It's also very British. If you're only familiar with the movie, it's got a different tone in the novel.
I don't really remember. A kid of the 80s who had John Cusack and Jack Black. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll watch it. I don't really remember much about it, but
the book is great. The book is great.
All right. So I have Ghost written in the plans next. That's novellas, right? You do in the four
sort of. It's 4 novellas, but they're all actually linked together and form a novel.
Oh, okay.
So depends on how you want to look at it.
So just one story. Okay, so my question to you is, these are the next 3 that I'm looking at here. Which would you? I'm gonna make you pick a favorite kid here. Okay. Which of the 3 would you recommend I do next? Little Girls, Snow, or Floating Staircase?
Man, I would say. Man, that is tough.
See, he loves.
You know what? I'm going to go by like what you. I've watched your YouTube channel and I've seen your stuff. I'm trying to think. Snow again. If you like the narrows, Snow ratchets it up even more. It is a breakneck monster book. Breakneck speed monster book. Little Girls is sort of a modern gothic ghost story, and Floating Staircase is sort of like me. Stretching my writerly muscles to be like Peter Straub.
Okay. What Straub should I read? Because I've only read Talisman with King. I've had Ghost Story.
Mike, shame.
I know. And here's the thing is, I think what soured me was like I never really cared for Talisman that much, and I admittedly, incorrectly, in just very irresponsibly blamed Peter Straub and said, "Oh, well, the arts I didn't like must have been him because it couldn't have been Stephen King." I'm like, that's really, really stupid of you. So I've had Ghost Story in the plans for years, but you keep mentioning, is it Coco? That was called?
Coco. So Ghost Story, everybody would probably recommend Ghost Story, and it is a fantastic novel. I love Ghost Story. However, my favorite Peter Straub is a book called The Throat, and it's a very Dashiell Hammett sort of noir detective novel with a vein of ghost story running through it, and I just love how he is. It's probably his most ambitious book, I feel, and I know there's his fandom may argue that, but it's so bold that like it's told in the first person from his character Timothy Underhill, who references Peter Straub as an author that he's worked with to write books like The Throat. It's so meta and it's one of those books where I read and I'm like, wow, I didn't know you could do this as a writer. This is awesome. So, and the language is brilliant. It's just it's Peter Straub doing sort of like Dashiell Hammett noir, I guess is the best way to say it. It's just very cool.
Okay, well, I got shamed, so I'll make it a point to finally get to, because when I talked to Blake Crouch, I got shamed for never reading Richard Harris before, so I've got to add Richard Harris and Peter Straub to my list now as I get these very successful authors telling me that I'm doing it wrong. So the Hive. Yeah. What can you tell me, if anything? The Hive comes out in April of next year. I plan to hit up is it Penguin Random House and be like, if you want to send one of those to me earlier, I won't be mad. But what can you tell me about it, if anything?
Well, you know what? I may have copies even before then. So if you want to hit me up, I will gladly mail you one, Mike.
I will definitely take you
What
up on
is
that.
it? It's about a suburban neighborhood that after a storm comes through, all these random items are thrown in people's yards, just everyday things that you would find. They're thrown in their yards, and these people begin to obsess over them until they realize what the connection is to all of these items. And they begin to develop this sort of hive mind mentality in order to bring their pieces of these things together to construct something.
Oh.
And I just turned in edits on this thing today at 907 pages,
Wow.
10 main characters. It was an extremely ambitious book that I wrote a draft of many years ago, and it was just too much to tackle, and I just got frustrated and stuck it in a drawer. But it always had kind of resonated and stuck in my mind. I couldn't get rid of it, so I decided to bring it back out, see if I could work through it and make it manageable. And I cut it all the way down to 900 pages. So yeah,
is that 10 POV characters, or is it not in
there? It's all third person. It's third person.
Okay. All right. Oh, wow. So would you classify that more science fiction-y? Because it's kind of getting some Close Encounters vibes.
It's got, yeah, actually it does have a bit of a Close Encounters vibe. Yeah, like I said when we were talking earlier, I mean it's horror, it's kind of otherworldly, it's other plane of existency, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it will have some arguable sci-fi elements to it, I think. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds.
It's kind of tough to categorize. It's like schizophrenia on a page. It's what
yeah. There's this new show on by Vince Gilligan, who did Breaking Bad and the X-Files, called *𝕬𝕬𝕣𝕠𝕜𝕤, that's on Apple, and it's playing real big into the hive mind stuff. It's really cool. I've
heard some people talking about it recently. Yeah.
Yeah, Vince Gilligan doesn't make bad TV. Well, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate it so much. And again, thank you so much for the entertainment this year. It's been really, really great. Any other horror authors out there you want to recommend for me? Any modern, any still alive, still working horror authors that are still writing horror that you are a personal favorite of?
I just came back from an event last weekend where I was honored to be around friends and colleagues who are all doing great work. I would recommend Philip Fracassi.
Definitely. Boys in the Valley.
He's awesome. Boys in the Valley. He's got the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre just came out. Clay McLeod Chapman, his book What Kind of Mother still like lives in my head, but I think Shiny Happy People is his newest. Rebecca Rowland, she's got a book coming out in January called Eminence Front. That is, if you like just messed up Arctic winter horror, that's the place to go. Eminence Front. I mean, yeah, those are, and I get to spend, my job obligates me to be around people who are much more creative than I am, who just fill the coffers when I'm around them. So I hear their stories, I read their work. These guys are all fantastic. I mean, I could tell you names all night, but yeah, they're top of mind because I was just with them.
All right. Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, that's the best way. Are you on the socials or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm all over. I mean, my website is ronaldmalfi.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. I don't check those messages often, but you could kind of hit me up from there. And if I'm not doing book stuff, I am on the road with my band Veer, and that's at veerband.net. And you can check out our music and when you can see what I'm doing when I'm not buried in a laptop typing, I guess.
And I will drop links down below, guys, to his Amazon front where you can buy all of his books, and you should buy all of his books. And I look forward to reading the rest of them. So thank you, sir, so much for making the time to do this, and good luck on the book tour and the band tour.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it so much.